This is Matt Rosen, and this is the Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of the Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen. I'm your host, Matt Rosen. Glad to have you all listening in today. We've got a special guest today. He's a good buddy of mine that I've known long enough that, heck, I think our friendship's old enough to buy alcohol. His name's Brian Childers, and Brian, I'd like to welcome you to the Grit Mindset.
Matt, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here, really honored to be here. And yes, you're right. I think we are. Our friendship is old enough to buy liquor now. So,
Well, it's great to have you on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
Sure. Grew up in a little small town in Louisiana, probably less than 2,000 people, way back in the day, a little town called Colfax, right there in central Louisiana, and grew up there. My parents were both school teachers. My dad went on to be a principal and coach. Lived in a, I guess, for those who are old enough to remember Mayberry, I just feel like I grew up in Mayberry, and it was the best of times, right? I mean, it was just great people, great times, and just remember some specifics there, a few things that growing up that I played football at the local high school, played all kinds of sports, but I remember training one summer, and I remember being out running on the side of the road, and I can remember it just like it was yesterday, and remember thinking, man, if I could ever make $50,000 a year, I'd be rich, right?
Seemed like a lot then.
It was a lot in Colfax, Louisiana, back in the late 70s. Grew up there, then went to school at Northwestern State in Natchitoches, Louisiana. Got my degree there in computer technology. Came out to DFW and worked in Fort Worth at what was at the time General Dynamics, now Lockheed Martin. Remember my very first day walking in. Got introduced to a bunch of people. Walked into the data center, and it literally was like NASA, Walked in, there were operation people and monitors everywhere. Walked down this hallway and turned left. And for those who are old enough to remember the old mainframe days, there were mainframes, IBM mainframes as far as you could see. And I walked all the way down. At the end of the hallway was a network control center. And that was part of the group I was going to go to work with.
Now, did you go to school for that? Did you have a computer science degree?
No, it was more of a computer technology degree, but it really did not prepare me for this moment in time, And walked in, and there was a guy that was running the network control center there. And I remember thinking, holy cow, there were network circuits going all over the world, as a defense contractor. I remember going home that night and literally walking into my apartment thinking, they'll fire me within 30 days. There's no way I'll make it. Within 18 months, I was running that network control center. And so I went from crimping coax cables to running the network control center and managing connections all over the world. And so went from there to work for a IT consulting company, and we wound up going public. And then Lucent Technologies bought us, and it was a great run and a great time. And I worked to become a managing director there, and had about 300 people reporting to me, all the way from offices in the UK to across the United States. And from there, went on to start my own business, started Comport in 2001.
Well, tell us about Comport. What does the company do?
So we provide fractional CIO services. I call it there's a V1 and a V2 to it, and you've known me through that whole process. The V1 version grew it and worked with a lot of large enterprise companies, big names, grew the company to about 26 people, and wound up selling it to a company out of Houston, and stayed with them as part of the agreement for 2 years, a little over actually. And then right at the end of 2011, relaunched the V2 version, which is providing just fractional CIO services. So we stay now out of the tech piece of it, but really more aligning the technology and business together. So
you went from almost being out of a work, not sure if you're going to make it, crimping coax cables, to now you're out there helping businesses manage their IT and advising them on strategy.
And I have to say, Matt, I love what I do. I don't work with large enterprise clients anymore. I work predominantly with that small to mid-sized sector, 10, 20 million to $250,000, 250 million, sorry. And I love that. And I love working directly with the business owners. I feel like one of the big things I bring to the table is not just what do I know about technology, because, I'm never the smartest technical guy in the room, but I'm a guy who knows a guy. And, that's what they kind of coin it around the IT roundtable a little bit. So I feel like that's probably a better asset, but what I do understand is business. And I understand that when that person, that man or woman, is pulling that money out of their pocket, if you will, to pay me, I know that's coming right out of their money and not out of a corporation's money.
Yeah, and you want to make sure they're getting value for that.
Absolutely.
So were there some influences early on that caused you to want to take the entrepreneurial route and work for yourself?
So, yes. Probably one of the biggest influences is my dad's dad, my grandfather on my dad's side.
Yeah, tell us about him.
Just a guy that, growing up, he started out literally back in the day delivering block ice when they had real ice boxes. And he was driving a truck delivering ice to homes in, again, rural Louisiana. And went all the way to, he was able to at one point then buy a truck. Then he had another truck and continued to grow, went on to own a construction company, built that to a multi-million-dollar business back in the Depression era, back in the 30s, right? And would literally have dinner at the Capitol in Louisiana with the governor. And
brought the ice for drinks.
Yeah, that's right. But nice. But he was just an inspiration to see that. And my dad had a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit inside of him. I think my mom, God bless her soul, I think she was just very conservative, and he wanted to venture out into that, but didn't. So when I started my company, I remember they were living in Marshall, Texas. They moved to be with my sister and her daughters. And I remember being there and literally looking through the dictionary one time, looking up my company name, and I came across Comport, which the proper pronunciation is Comport, right, to bring together.
I didn't know that.
And but it was like, okay, well, that's a great name because com for communications, portal, so I'll just call it Comport. But my mom, I worked for a corporate, I was a managing director working for a company at the time, Lucent Technologies, and she could not for the life of her understand why I wanted to leave corporate America to go start my own thing. But my dad was all behind it, And so my grandfather, I guess his DNA flowed into me a little bit, talking about how successful he was. Their story goes that he contracted a fever, and there had been only like 35 cases of it in the United States, and hardly anyone had lived through it. And so he was sick for 18 months.
Wow.
And they literally would put him in a bathtub and put ice on top of him to bring his temperature down. And so when he went in, he was a multimillionaire, and when he came out on the other side, he owed like $77,000 in debt, and that was kind of the end of his entrepreneurial run at that point. So
that's unfortunate. Any specific lessons that you learned from him about starting and running a business?
That you have to be determined, right? You have to have grit, right? You have to go out every day and work hard. And he taught that, and I saw him live that out in the years that I got to see him. And I saw that in my dad too, don't get me wrong, but just to go from delivering literally blocks of ice to being a multimillionaire, having dinner at the state capitol with the governor, right? I mean, that's a rags to riches story.
Yeah, that's amazing. You don't hear a lot of those, especially from the Depression era.
Exactly.
Like 25% of people out of work, and I think that's what drove the generation after that to take more conservative jobs. So you mentioned the word, grit. Obviously, that's what this podcast is all about, but love to hear what it means to you, both personally and professionally.
So for me, grit, I equate that to discipline, right? I think at the end of the day, you can have the emotion of desire, right? Of passion. And I think I'll go back to that in a little bit, and you need that passion. But at the end of the day, your emotions are going to fade, right? At some point, the excitement of whatever it is you're doing is going to fade. And you have to have the discipline and the determination that you're going to get up and you're going to go to work and you're going to do it. And that's regardless of whether you're exercising, because even like yesterday, I got home after being at a client all day, and I literally was thinking, my gosh, I'd love to just change into some comfortable clothes, get on the couch, and just relax. But I was like, you're not going to do that. You're going to get out there and you're going to get out in the driveway and you're going to do whatever it takes to get it done. And so I do, and I work out about 5 days a week. And to me, I equate grit with discipline and determination.
No, that's great. So tell us a story about, starting Comport and maybe a difficult time. I hate to call them failures because failures are opportunities to learn. So maybe a difficult story that you had to work through to get where you are today, and what you learned from it as well.
Yeah. So I do have a story. I will tell you this, and I think you'll agree with this, and I think anybody that's ever owned their own company and started from scratch will agree. There's never been a business owner who's never gone through a rough time, right? There was a guy who was a mentor to me, and as I was getting started, and he bought into a company, and it was a $3 million company, and they grew it to $50 million, right? And he sold it. And this was after all of that. And I remember talking to him. His name was Tim Kilpatrick. And I was talking with him one day about, just worry. And he said, Brian, there was never a day I didn't drive to work thinking I could lose it all. Now, what is the reality of that? Slim to none.
Sure.
But that's what you live with. So for me, that defining moment was we had grown the company to about 26 people. My number one, my only, I guess, really sales guy that I had was and still is a good friend of mine. And he had an opportunity to go to work for IBM. And I mean, it was very lucrative. I could not blame him for it. But man, finding the replacement was impossible. He was very, very good and really super good at what he did. And I can remember being in the study on a Wednesday night and my wife walking in to the study, and she looked at me and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know how we're going to make payroll." And payroll was Friday. And just that was a moment that I really thought, this is it. The old adage goes, you can miss a lot of things, but don't miss payroll.
Yeah,
right?
That's usually the beginning of the end.
But, I'm a spiritual guy, man. I mean, I believe divine intervention, payments, on invoices started coming in. I had a great banker who was a local guy, and we made payroll. And not going to tell you that was the last tight point, but that was a defining moment for me in remembering that.
Were you ever able to replace that sales guy? That's
Nope.
hard to do.
Nope. I never was.
Yeah.
I never was. Fortunately, that was during the process of the guy in, the company in Houston wanting to buy me. So it worked out fine. But again, timing, you know.
So what was it like going from, being the boss, having, 25 or so employees to just working for yourself? I know you've shared with me you've enjoyed it, but maybe share with the audience kind of what that transition's been like.
Well, so for me, it actually has been just, man, it's just been a dream come true, to be honest with you. I love being the only full-time employee. I love partnering with different companies and different people that come alongside what I do to deliver solutions. And those companies and those people, I vet them very strongly, right? I've been fortunate enough, you've introduced me to a couple of clients and you make it clear, right? Don't screw this up. And that's not exactly what
That's
you
not the
say.
words I use. It's close.
It's close enough for our audience, right? But, it definitely is, it's a big responsibility. But I like not having to worry about making payroll every 2 weeks for 26 people, and I bootstrapped that thing. That I didn't have any funding or any of that stuff. I was able to do that through some stock and stock options that I had acquired over the time from the startup company to Lucent and things like that. But, it was really, again, that was money coming directly out of my pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've taken a lot of risk and you've been successful as a result. I'd be curious to hear, you obviously say you like to work with the founders that are paying out of their pocket. Are there any inspirational stories of grit you've witnessed, working for others and helping them on their journey?
I've worked with a couple of clients, yes, that I've seen them go through times that were really tough, right? And I enjoy, or I've actually been asked to go to work with a client that, I don't know if I should say this on our podcast, but that, you help them, right? I mean, you do the things because I know them, I knew them, and I wanted to be someone that helped them through these tough times, right? You can't make a living on just doing that, but I do enjoy doing that, right? And I've seen some clients go through times when, we all get out over our skis at times, as business owners. We think it's always going to be good. And it takes a gritty mindset to not let yourself do that, right? Yeah. You have to really be calculated in what you do, how you spend, and control that.
Any habits that you've developed to cultivate that grit mindset? You talked about working out 5 times a week, but are there other habits that you have that you can share?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm a motiversity freak. I listen to that on YouTube all the time. And I feel like there are messages in there that a lot of times they're talking about sports and athletics and stuff, but they also talk about the same principles applying to life situations, So I get some inspiration from that. I read a little bit. Not
Any
as
favorite books?
So there are 3 that are kind of come to mind. One is there's a book by a guy named Jeff Olson, Olson, called The Slight Edge, and that is about changes don't happen in quantum leaps, right? You don't get in shape, out of shape. You don't become proficient or not in the snap of a finger. Those are little steps. Time is 1% difference, 1% difference, 1% difference. So that's one, right? Which is kind of the grit and the mindset and the determination. And then there's another one called The Go-Giver. And it is about just paying everything forward, right? That you don't give to get, you just give. And it'll come back to you. Don't worry about it coming back. It'll come back to you. If you're not dealing with people that you're giving them opportunity and they're not really searching out opportunity for you, in whatever regard that is, you probably need to change, with that guy. And then a book that was introduced to me just about a year ago was by our good friend John Humphrey, and it's called Who Not How. And that probably epitomizes my career right there. That's what I was saying earlier. I'm in the young days, in the early days of my career, you have to know the hows, but later in life, you elevate, or I look at it as I have to elevate my game from knowing the hows to knowing the who's to get the hows done, and directing that.
Yeah, that's a theme you've hit on a couple times, but I'll ask you directly, talk about the importance of a network.
It's imperative.
Yeah.
I would say, all kidding aside, right? We've been in IT Roundtable for decades.
Yeah.
Right?
21 years.
21 years, right?
Yep.
and you've run that most of the time, right? And, you talk about grit mindset, you show up most of the time to run that thing, right? The only time you don't is if you're out traveling on business, right? Very rarely are you not there, right? So that's one. And then there's another group I'm part of that I get to play Matt Rosen in that group. And it's over in Fort Worth, and it's more of a business roundtable group. And so Comport happens to be the technology arm or member of that. But those absolutely have been imperative to me getting to know really good people, really smart people. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, for the listeners, we've got an IT networking group that's been together for 21 years, and one of the key expectations is to show up expecting to give before you receive.
Amen.
And I think that's the key to it. But yeah, at the same time, you got to know if you're never getting anything in return. Right. I'm a big fan of universe keeps score. Don't always expect to be paid back by those I give to, but you hope to get it from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, there's also a story with Matt that he'll know what I'm talking about. That it was a wintry day. It had been raining one morning.
I know where this is
going. I texted him and I was like, "Hey, I'm not going to make it today. I'm kind of tired." And about 30 seconds later, I get this text. This was all it said: "Pros play hurt." And I've never forgotten that. So I've never called in and just said, "Hey, I'm tired. I'm not coming in."
That's something you can apply to life because pros do play hurt.
Exactly. Right. So I think that was a good nudge. I mean, there are things you're told, right, in your life. And as jokingly as I say that really did resonate with me, right? You have to get up and work, right? I listened to Eric Thomas on the Motiversity, and he talks about, there are people that may have more talent than you. There may be people who have more money than you. What are you going to do when 1,000 people want the same thing you do? You better outwork them, right? And that's really what you were saying, right? Is like pros play hurt. They get out there. So what? They got a boo-boo. Get out there, right? You've got to fight for what you want. My dad, kind of said a couple of things to me in my lifetime that I really held on to, and one of those was I was working in high school at a car dealership, and he said that as I was getting ready to go the first day, he said, "Son, if there's nothing else to do, grab a broom and start sweeping." Right?
I like that.
And he meant that. He meant literally, if there's nothing else to do, don't sit around, don't wait on them to tell you something, just grab a broom and start sweeping. And I've held on to that, not just in the literal sense, but in the figurative sense. And I feel like just grab a broom and start sweeping, right? Start moving, do something. That was one of the things that stood out for me. And then the other thing was, that was really my first full-time summer job. And he said, "What you want, son, is every time they write that check and hand you that paycheck, that you want them to think, man, I can't believe what kind of deal we're getting from this kid."
How'd you do at that car dealership?
I worked that summer and went on, and that was probably...
Decided you didn't want to sell cars?
Decided I didn't want to sell cars.
Nothing.
I just didn't. I'm not qualified.
Well, your dad sounds like a great guy. Anything else you kind of took away from him? Because it sounds like your grandfather took great risk. He maybe for multiple reasons didn't, but things that you took away from that.
Yeah, my dad was always my coach, right? I mean, playing summer baseball, football, track, whatever. He was always my coach. And I know a lot of people can think, oh, yeah, so you had it easy. Your dad was a coach. Well, it was exactly 180 degrees.
That's the opposite. He's probably harder on you than anybody else.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. And, he just instilled in me, clearly I was never the biggest guy on the field or whatever, but I played as hard as I could, no matter if it was baseball, basketball, ran track, played quarterback in football, and I can remember one time we were getting beat pretty bad, and it was even still in the first half. And I got hit pretty hard, They were bigger, faster, stronger. Other than that, we were equally matched, playing quarterback. And I tapped my helmet, to take myself out of the game. And I remembered, kind of seeing his face being disappointed, and I never wanted to see that again. And so I put myself back in the game, and I played as hard as I could for the rest of that half and the second half. And we still got our, what's handed to us, right? But I was like, I never want to see that on my dad's face again.
Yeah.
Well,
that's an inspiring story. And, sometimes you learn a lot more from heartache than you do from success, for sure.
Yeah. My mom was my biggest cheerleader, our biggest cheerleader. I had an older sister and a younger brother. And she just, I look back now, especially being grown, right? And all that we've gone through with our kids who are grown now. And, like I said, they were school teachers in Louisiana, so money didn't flow freely there, right? But we never knew it.
Yeah.
And so I think about all the sacrifices that they made for us, and what they endured to give us the best life that we could.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like special folks. Any lessons that you've taken and imparted your children with?
Yeah.
Wellness?
Yeah. I the one daughter who's now married and living in DC.
Yeah.
She was more of the dancer.
Yeah.
And then the younger one was more of the soccer player and played a goalkeeper, and they both are competitive. We taught them in life, always shake with a firm hand, hold your head up, look people in the eye, speak clearly to them. And I cannot tell you how many times our girls would go spend the night with friends, and the parents would bring them home and go, "Holy cow, what did you teach them?"
Yeah.
And it wasn't just us, right?
Yeah.
But you set the example that, conduct yourself in a way, right, that you want to be known as being competent and capable in whatever you do. And I think to see their successes now in their professions, her mom and I are very, very proud of them.
That's awesome. I think those are good lessons for anyone to take away from this. So, as we're kind of wrapping up the show here, would love to hear from you, anything you maybe wish you knew earlier, or thoughts you would share with those that are kind of getting started on their first entrepreneurial journey, maybe their second.
Sure. What I will tell you, starting out, it is going to be hard. But anything good is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, right? Just because something's difficult doesn't make it bad. I was saying earlier about passion, right? Passion won't carry you through, but find out what your passion is, right? What are you passionate about? It doesn't have to be about technology, whatever that is. I've got one daughter that's a school teacher and another one that works in court reporting and the legal side of things. So it doesn't have to be what we do, but find out what your passion is, and just know that you're going to need a determined grit mindset to stick it through, because there are tough times are going to come. You've heard some stories I've given, right? And so don't quit. And then I would say, if I were talking to the younger me, I would say, hey, kid, it's going to be tough, right? There's going to be tough times. There's going to be hard spots you're going to go through, but at the end, you're going to make it.
Yeah.
No,
that's great. Well, Brian, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't here yet today?
No, I do want to say, I guess, I will say one thing. There are a few people in my life from a career standpoint that have impacted me. One is a guy that I've officed with. He gave me my first office space when I started Comport. That's George Ferris. John Humphrey has been a great friend and a great mentor. My brother-in-law is a great guy, and he's been a great inspiration to me. But another person is you, and I really mean that sincerely. I've seen you go through ups and downs through your career. I saw you with Start Aleda, and you have that grit mindset. I mean, this show is perfect for you.
I appreciate that.
So I appreciate you, and I appreciate your mindset, and you are an inspiration to a lot of people.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot hearing it from you. Well, for those out there listening, Brian shared a lot of great stuff. He's got a great story. I'll make sure I link him and Comport to the show Brian, thanks for being a friend and inspiration to coach me as well. I know when I was starting Eleda, there was a lot of phone calls to you, be like, what should I do about this? Hey, I'm about to sell that. Can you come help me figure it out? So I definitely wouldn't be here without folks like you and John and Dave and others that have been,
Sure.
and Michael, have all been on the show. So thanks for coming and sharing the story with us today. For our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.